Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we'll be looking at the 1099 siege of Jerusalem by Crusader forces against the Fatimid Caliphate. So when one thinks of a critical point in history, we like to think of the Allied victory in World War II or the Cold War. However, in my view, one of the biggest turning points in history would be the Crusader victory in Jerusalem in 1099. This single victory would result in multiple Crusader kingdoms being set up, established and destroyed, along with multiple Muslim empires. It would also help foster a rivalry between East and West and Muslim versus Christian that lasts even to this day with the Taliban and ISIS. So, when the First Crusade began to draw to an end, with the Crusaders arriving near Jerusalem, just a year prior, the Fatimid Caliphate had actually seized the moment of the Seljuk Turks losing to take Jerusalem from them, essentially a top 10 anime betrayals moment. And although the Fatimids only had the city for a year, they had already made extensive preparations for the Crusaders to arrive, as they had sent envoys over to the Crusaders saying to stop the crusade, for they were going to let the Crusaders in and visit the holy sites. However, the Crusaders declined this. So the new Fatimid governor of Jerusalem, Iftikhar al-Dawla, made extensive repairs to the defense of Jerusalem. So repairing walls, he also expelled the Christian minorities, fearing they would try and help the Crusaders. He then poisoned all the wells outside of the city to make it so that the Crusaders could not drink the water, and he also cut down all the trees and destroyed them and burnt them to stop the Crusaders using them to construct siege engines. And on the 7th of June 1099, the Crusaders arrived with what is estimated to be between 12,200 troops and 13,300 troops, and they split them into two groups to attack the city from the north and south. And on the 13th of June, the first attack was launched. However, due to the Fatimids destroying all the wood, the Crusaders had no wood to make siege engines out of. However, they did find some wood in a cave, which they used to turn into a ladder, where a Crusader named Rain Bold scaled the ladder to try and make a foothold upon the wall, but failed and was killed, sadly. Due to this, the Crusaders retreated and decided not to attack until proper equipment arrived. The Crusaders also faced problems due to the fact they had lack of water and food, thanks to the poisoning and the fact that generally there is not much food growing around the deserts, and also that there was a Fatimid army marching north from Egypt. However, on the 17th of June 1099, the Crusaders heard that English and Genoese ships had arrived at Jaffa, which is a port near Jerusalem, with supplies to essentially feed the Crusaders and provide them with weapons. They also started to begin to chop down a nearby forest to produce siege engines, and soon they had created two siege towers along with a battering ram with an iron head, scaling ladders, and wattling screens. Now, if you don't know, wattling screens they're made of wattling, and they're designed to be moved forward closer and closer to the walls of castles, while preventing arrows from hitting the soldiers behind them. They're essentially the very earliest form of a ballistic shield as we'd know it now. And of course, scaling ladders like siege towers, but without any protection. Now, soon the Crusaders had also built catapults in position and began to fire them, and on the 14th of July, the attack began. So this is a very long period in between when the Crusaders stop the assault and when the Crusaders begin it again. Now, obviously, the Fatimids are starting to suffer inside the city. Obviously, disease is going to spread, lack of food and water. However, in terms of an average medieval siege, this is quite a short one. So this video may be a bit shorter than normal, just due to the fact that, in general, this is probably one of the shortest sieges you'll ever really see. So Godfrey of Boulogne, who was in charge of the northern section of the army, so he was attacking from the north and into the city, and by the end of the day, on the 14th of July, he was able to break through the first line of defense. Now, if you don't know, Jerusalem at this period has three main walls, and they're named creatively the first wall, the second wall, and the third wall. Now, these names are essentially driven from the fact that each wall was built at a different period of time, mostly under the Romans. But these walls have been repaired and reused so much, as many walls did. So, like in the previous video, we explained Constantinople and the fact that its walls have been built by Theodosius II, and was used all the way up until 1453. And in the south, Raymond of Toulouse, who was in charge of obviously the southern forces, he was unable to actually break through the first line of defense as he met ferocious resistance, essentially. And on the 15th, the attack continued in the north. And soon, Ludov of Tournai was the first crusader on the actual main part of the walls. This resulted in the Fatimid resistance crumbling and the defences essentially collapsed, as they were able to force the Fatimids off the walls and continue pushing, meaning that the Fatimids couldn't actually set up on the second line of defences. And eventually in the south, the Crusaders were able to storm the city walls and take the area. Now, on the 15th of July, the same date, the siege was over at that point, really. There was a Muslim stronghold in the Tower of David, where it is reported that some Muslim soldiers fought till the end, for a few days. However, that's disputed. And also, it is believed that the Jews who were helping the Muslims at the time to fight the mosques, of course, they knew that they'd also be killed by the Crusaders, reportedly went into their mosque and accepted that they'd be all killed and had the mosque burnt down above them. However, it's also reported that there were no Jews in it at the time, so it's all disputed. And again, like many of the other videos, records at this time vary from Crusaders to Muslim chroniclers. Some make it a massive thing, some make it very small. It's very hard to tell. However, the Crusaders did murder most of the inhabitants of the city, as, like I said, the Christians had been expelled. Now, according to eyewitness accounts, 70,000 inhabitants were slaughtered. However, it's quite unlikely, as the city couldn't really hold 70,000. Even though it had been filled with refugees, it's more likely that it was 40,000, which is what the modern estimate is. Now, like I mentioned, the massacre was not only towards Muslims, but also Jews, and who had their synagogues burnt and their holy places burnt, things like that. And anyone who wasn't essentially massacred was just sold into slavery. As although the Christians didn't really do slavery as much as potentially the Muslim Barbary pirates did, who were mostly on the coast of North Africa, it was still something that they would have done. But it was mostly focused in the Middle East. There weren't really any Muslim slaves that were brought to Europe. It was very much centered around the Holy Lands. Now, following this, the Kingdom of Jerusalem is established along with the other Crusader kingdoms. And not only this, but the Dome of the Rock and many other holy sites are given to the newly formed Knights Templar as their headquarters. This doesn't happen for a few years later, as the Knights Templar do take a while to form, and even after they're first formed, they take quite a while to actually be properly established with the Pope and being registered and recognised by the kingdoms and the other knights and the lords. But that is a video for another time, perhaps. So overall, the siege was a relatively short one compared to other medieval sieges at the time. I mean, it only went from the 7th of June to the 15th of July, so less than essentially a month. So really quick. But again, we must remember that, of course, the Fatimids didn't really have much defense. In fact, their numbers are unknown in terms of what they had. We know they had 400 knights, but their number of troops are unknown. And of course, also militia made up of citizenry. Again, they would have also faced the problem that they'd just besieged the city, a year prior. So, and also the Crusader forces at this period really couldn't be stopped, thanks to Seljuk Turk, very little resistance, and also the Fatimids, of course, had just come up and taken the city, so not many of them were there. But overall, still a very impressive siege. It would define essentially all the Holy Lands for the rest of time, even to this day. But overall, it was the culminating event, as of course there were still some Muslim cities holding out against the Crusaders, before the First Crusade was truly over, where there was peace on the land and no one was really fighting. However, this is essentially the culminating event of it, with it being taken. So thank you all for watching.